Hi, thank you for stopping by. My name is Doel Ortiz, and today we're going to review some of the IO psychology principles. Some of those principles of IO psychology are the historical influence, socialization process and effectiveness, reducing work-family conflict, developing job performance techniques, and organizational constraints. The first question that we're going to review as it relates to historical influence is how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. So there's several events, I believe, and a lot of this was from the text, of course, that have had a major influence on the history of biopsychology. We know that the field, the discipline of biopsychology has been around for about 100 years, according to recorded history, that is. And really, just as of late, one of the major things that has changed the scope and the practice of biopsychology has been the job market. So where higher unemployment in recent years has depressed the job market for organizational psychologies, and this is both in the academic and non-academic settings, the budget demands across industries and academia to keep costs down, keeps products and services at lower prices. The union movements such as the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, this is the Fair Labor Standards Act from the 1930s, but there's been some continual progress between the certain organizations and different groups that have tried to basically create change through work-family conflict that exists, extended family medical leave, and just trying to better the workplace environment for employees. So the Fair Labor Standards Act continues to be reviewed by experts in that field. The other thing is increased temporary project work with unskilled and skilled labor. And we'll also review the implications of 9/11 for emergency response among businesses. So since 9/11, there's been more emergency response initiatives across employers. The other thing too is weather-related incidents. I'm here in Florida, and there's business continuity plans that we have in place for weather-related events, such as the recent Hurricane Irma. Of course, you had Hurricane Harvey in Texas, and now different organizations have to be prepared for those types of things. And even here, just recently in Florida, we had the mass shooting, of course, in Parkland, Florida. So now you're seeing a lot of organizations doing active shooter drills, and all of this, a lot of this really started as the foundation from the implications of 9/11. As it relates to socialization, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? So socialization, according to the text, is taking a new employee, it's an outsider, and making them into a full-fledged organizational member. So that's very distinct from onboarding. Onboarding it's really more of orientation. It goes over policy, procedures, really a layout of the actual job, role, responsibilities. And that typically happens between the first 1 or 2 weeks. But onboarding obviously is distinct from socialization because the goal is simply acculturation as it relates to socialization, whereby a new member can integrate into the culture. They can adapt to the actual mission, values of the particular organization. So it's a little bit more involved in the relationship between the employer and the employee. This includes learning how to do the job effectively, getting along with others, learning company history and the vision. So it's more about just clocking in and doing your job. There's definitely really getting involved in what the company is doing, the department, and that, of course, has related to advantages for many companies who are very intentional. I know one that I reviewed from the text. Southwest is a big one, Netflix, or several organizations, Starbucks. And when they incorporate this into the hiring process, Studies have shown that employees exhibit higher levels of job satisfaction, internal work motivation, and job involvement. So reducing work-family conflict. How can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? So this is a challenge, obviously, for many organizations. High-stress environments are obviously very common. And I happen to work in the healthcare field, and it's very common for employees to work long hours and high-stress environments, a lot of challenges, and this is very common. And some of the techniques that we can utilize or support through instituting policies and benefits to employees seeking to balance work and family, opportunities to include working from telecommuting on certain days, extended maternity leave, and most importantly, supervisor support. So I've seen in my organization where there's a couple of departments that have, for example, on a Friday, they can work from home. So this is something that human resources is getting involved to try to create more opportunities for employees to work from home. And there's ongoing policy review on maternity leave, of course, and supervisor support is the big one. And really, if you can have a company that's pro work family balance, but if your supervisor's not on board with that, it can definitely pose a challenge. So I do believe that HR and other business leaders need to make all employees aware of those resources made available. I believe in training for frontline leaders to be aware and to be sensitive to those demands from home that employees may have. And of course, and that ultimately it's going to reduce employee tension, anxiety when family events can spill over into work life. Developing job performance techniques. Imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? Think of Murphy's List. So some of the techniques that I would implement would be a combination of in-role task-oriented behaviors and interpersonally oriented behaviors, extra role, in which to evaluate performance. Now, this, of course, is taken from Murphy's List. And one of the things I have kind of have a personal note with that is with one of in my present company that I'm working for. I've been with them 4 years, and they asked me, why should you get the job? Why should we hire you? And I said, not because of technique. It really is for character. And I think that that's something that maybe companies can overlook in the recruitment process and interviews, is that you can train people on technique, but you may not necessarily be able to train people on certain interpersonal skills, and which are very critical to success of not just the individual, but the department, teams, and the organization as a whole. So really just making sure that there's a balance of techniques to review in terms of evaluating performance. The adequacy of measurements would be the first goal. So just looking at tools, systems, processes that are being used, because those also can pose as barriers to being successful. Technology is great when it works, but it's a challenge when it doesn't, right? And it could be, it's one of those things that we have to be careful, because we may do data studies and we have certain, in terms of research, be able to review processes as, but we don't know some of the variability that exists sometimes in those processes, tools, systems, and so on. So there are external forces that could present barriers, such as weather, economy. We talked about certain weather-related events, and the economy, of course. A good example of that would be, for example, that I'll take from the text is if when you have a real estate agent who can be very, very successful, but let's say the mortgage interest rate goes up to 20%. Now that obviously is going to be a barrier. It doesn't matter how good that salesman may be. Variability and instability of job performance is another assessment that could be used. Quality metrics using customer surveys. So yeah, surveys obviously are very important for the customers, for the individual themselves. impact on financials, such as efforts to reduce waste and cost savings. So I've seen this throughout my career where in terms of being evaluated, what are some of the responsibilities? What are some of the things you're doing in your role right now to reduce waste in your everyday work? Also, what are you doing to save the company money? What types of initiatives, what types of projects are you working on that's best for the company, that's going to help them reduce waste, improve efficiency, and improve customer satisfaction? So those are the things I believe are helpful in terms of performance assessment and increased employee development. Organizational constraints. What are some of the possible common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So counterproductive work behaviors can be caused by situation-based conditions, emotions people feel when they're exposed to stressful work conditions. So a good example of this was the stressor emotional model proposed by Spector and Fox. If we decide that work conditions are stressors, this can likely invoke negative emotions such as anxiety, anger, and dissatisfaction. Injustice is another one, such as an employee being passed over for a promotion or a pay raise, or being on disciplinary action for an incident for which an employee had little control over. These constraints can make exceptional, high-performing employees withdraw and seek other employment opportunities, particularly when there is no support or coaching through individual and group decisions. So with that, I do leave you with a Bible verse. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. So that's from Proverbs 11:14. I want to thank you for stopping by to review some of the principles from industrial organizational psychology. I look forward to working with you in the future, and thank you again, and have a great evening.